Have you ever felt a deep sadness or melancholy and just needed someone to see you? Someone to be with you in your emotional blues? So it wasn't quite so lonely?
Join me as I share a little about my most recent bout with grief and which decks I used to ease the loneliness pains. As you can tell by the boxes behind me, I recently moved 8 months ago, and I've had a really hard time accepting my new home. This move was and is still really important to my partner, and that didn't exactly relieve the sensations of discomfort or the feelings of loss I experienced during and after the move. And since my experience has been distinctly different from my partner's experience, I felt very lonely as I learned to accept my new home. And for several months, I was overwhelmed by my grief and confusion and frustration. And that is when I used these decks. While these emotions are taboo in polite conversation, they're completely normal, and all of us experience them to some degree or another at some point in our lives. And for me, I needed to relieve the sense of loneliness I felt in my emotional blues before I could start processing the grief and confusion and frustration. Full disclosure, I have an amazing therapist who has been immensely supportive during this whole process. And these 5 decks in no way replace trauma-informed therapy's role in helping us process difficult feelings or experiences. Nor do these decks replace healthy community or mutually beneficial relationships with other human beings. On that note, let's look at these 5 decks that helped me feel seen and helped ease the loneliness pains I was experiencing in those most difficult months. And if any of these decks make you think of a similar deck or a deck you've used in a similar way, I would love to hear about it in the comments. The Drowning World Tarot might be one of the more obvious options out there because it reflects back to its reader a sense of emotional overwhelm and perhaps a sense of bittersweet beauty despite the pain or grief. The images in the Drowning World Tarot are staged photographs made by the incredibly prolific collaborative artist team Nicholas Kahn and Richard Selesnick. The accompanying guidebook was channeled and transcribed by author and scholar Sarah Falkner. If you're familiar with Pip-style tarot, you don't need the book, but it is fun in that it puts a new twist on a long-established, I'll bet, dialectic reading tradition. In my emotional discomfort, I found the images most helpful. And at the same time, I do love myself a twist on tradition, as well as Sarah Falkner's writing style. So I think I'll explore the book more thoroughly when I have more personal resources to spare. Feel free to let me know if that's something you would enjoy consuming on YouTube in the future. When I would read with this deck, I would see the scenes overwhelmed by water and feel my overwhelming emotions, and acknowledge my inner waters as true, even if they were too big for convenience. The Liminal Space Tarot, The Fool's Journey Through Uncanny Places, was another deck that reflected to me my emotional truths through art. This deck highlighted for me the major shift I was caught up in, as well as the aloneness I felt in those changes. Rosa published this photography deck in 2023 and reports that the images were inspired by the scenes of 2020 lockdown, invoking a relatable sense of loneliness that was strangely comforting. Since much of my frustration came from the disruption of my reality and my struggle to digest my new reality, liminality felt very familiar and comforting indeed. The reminder that I was between realities was fortifying, because in that context, my deep emotions made more sense. For many people who are taught to stuff their emotions away instead of feeling them, there's this unspoken belief that the emotions have no value. But in reality, emotions are the feedback we experience in response to our environment. And to be reminded of the liminality of my environment helped me make more room for my deep, responsive feelings, and helped me accept the nuggets of wisdom in my grief. Shadowscapes may seem like an unusual deck in this list, because it is the sentimentality of this deck that eased my loneliness pains. When I first found tarot in 2013, I was part of a witchy pagan craft group, and our brilliant host had all of Stephanie Pui-Mun's Dreamscapes artist books. We would all ooh and ah over her watercolor methods between projects of our own. It only made sense that my friend and fellow crafter purchased the deck and then read for me with it when my transiting Uranus squared my natal Uranus, which is astrology lingo for a big life disruption around the age of 25. The magical imagery reminds me of the time of life when I was deconstructing from the strict materialist worldview of my childhood and beginning to accept that there was more to life than what I could see with my physical eyes. So this deck is way more about nostalgia than anything else, as well as a reminder that I've gone through and survived difficult things before, and that I have spiritual and material guides supporting me through it all. So these three decks, the Tarot of the Drowning World, Liminal Space Tarot deck, and Shadowscapes Tarot, all helped me feel less lonely when I was overwhelmed and confused and frustrated and completely caught up in a grief spiral. I wasn't always spiraling though. Some of the time I was brainstorming and problem solving on how to make lemonade out of lemons. And two different decks were especially supportive to me as I reviewed my reality and my options to respond. The cards drawn arrived from a Kickstarter campaign during my bout with grief. Each card is a pencil drawing completed by Clinton Trevor Woods, inspired by their understanding of the playing card. I've been studying playing cards for the past 2 years, and this deck is a smash-up of playing cards and tarot. So it resonated with my current studies without challenging me to read the unillustrated pips of playing cards I'm still mastering. And it was the perfect combination for clear answers and straightforward advice I was looking for. I used the deck how I would usually a playing card deck, asking a series of investigative questions and pulling 3 cards per answer. When I learned about how Tom Benjamin was exploring an unusual technique for laying the cards down to a series of impromptu questions, I tried it out immediately and thoroughly enjoyed it. I even shared that reading with my therapist. Before I share the last deck on my list with you, I want to reflect that expressing ourselves creatively is hardwired into the ways human beings have evolved. It's how we process our experiences and then move forward through life as fully sovereign and completely present people. Being creative and sharing those creations with others is not only a fantastic way to maintain our own well-being, but it is also an effective strategy to resisting destructive forces, be they internal grief spirals or external injustices. So let this be a reminder, a gentle one for all of us, to feel our feelings and then allow them to fuel our next creative action. Mine was this YouTube video. And if you found this helpful or enjoyable, you can let me know by pressing the like button. If you are watching this in real time, then you know how the larger world order is struggling and affecting the well-being of everyone. And if you're watching this in the future, then you are no doubt struggling with the problems of your own time. This deck is a scanned replica of the Thoth Tarot, originally published in 1969 by US Games, and then misprinted with a green overlay in 1978. I have been relishing in this newly obtained greeny version of the Thoth, and have felt especially inspired by this deck to carve out moments of joy despite the internal and external pain. I have always loved the artwork of Lady Frida Harris. Even when I was afraid of using the Thoth Tarot, I still really enjoyed the images of the deck. Today, I am no longer afraid of Aleister Crowley or the Thoth Tarot, although I do approve of all actions done to contribute to reparations for groups of people harmed by Crowley's social Darwinism. And still, there is something about Lady Frida Harris's artwork that feels resonant with my experience of this place and time. The dates we have for the creation of this deck line up very closely with the dates of World War II. And today, World War II problems seem all too familiar. Almost like Lady Frida Harris is keeping me company as I sort out my reality and choose how I want to respond. Perhaps working with tarot artwork that was created in defiance of authoritarian governments has been bolstering my ability to channel my emotional blues into creative action as well.